Hey everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Teri Hunter. I'm an intuitive astrologer, and today I'm going to talk about Neptune's retrograde from 4 degrees to 1 degree Aries. This is a very significant transit in the respect that Neptune has not been conjunct the world axis since the 1800s, for like about 145 years. It spent a good period of time earlier this year in March, conjunct Saturn, Saturn the builder, Saturn the one that wants sustainability. So while Saturn is not involved in this retrograde, Neptune is going to be revisiting many of the concepts, the ideas, the soul's yearnings from this period of time. And this is a once in a lifetime transit. Generations will be born hundreds of years before this can happen again. And I say that because of the Saturn Neptune conjunction at the beginning of this. A retrograde is always a revisit, a reassessment, a resting, a recalibration, a reinvention. So let me talk a little bit about the idea of Neptune, because Neptune is a subtle yet powerful energy. If you think about the ocean, which Neptune rules, fresh water, which Neptune rules, there is, as humans, we have no power over the seas. And if the seas indeed represent our emotions, while we can rationalize and think our way through our emotions, whether we show them on the outside or not, they are revealed in our inner world. Neptune rules the 12th house, which is an inner world house where we spend time alone, where we retreat, where we create, where we meditate, where we are isolated, where we that are different from society are contained and put away and sometimes forgotten. It is a very challenging energy because the spiritual nature of Neptune is completely contrary to the earth element. You know, the earth, humans want to see it to believe it, and Neptune doesn't rule any of that. Neptune rules that creative imagination that if I can dream it, I can bring it into the physical world. And that is what Neptune's transit through Aries is going to foster. One of the most powerful things, I might say this a million times because there's so much powerful stuff going on, is the conversation that Neptune is continuing to have with Pluto and Uranus. These outer planets, we often kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just the way I see things, but I feel like the outer planets are sort of like, oh, that's just the landscape. Let's focus on those personal planets, Mercury, Venus. The personal planets are absolutely the demonstration, the acting out of what's happening on the outside. So Pluto in Aquarius making a sextile to Neptune, Neptune making a sextile to Uranus, and then Uranus making a trine to Pluto is a conversation that's going to go on for quite some time. Now, Pluto is currently retrograde and at 4 degrees. Neptune is going to retrograde at 4 degrees. I think this is extremely significant for a couple of reasons. First of all, the 4th degree represents the 4th house of Cancer in many schools of astrology. So we're revisiting whatever had power and control over us on a psychological level, on a deep level of our value, because Pluto rules the idea that if I have material goods, if I have enough wealth, if I have enough sexuality, if I have enough allure, and I am, how can I phrase it? There is an elixir to the Scorpio energy. It's almost like you see danger coming and you just cannot resist it. That is a human construct to get what we want, whereas Neptune doesn't need any of that nonsense. Neptune is more naive and more childlike and more innocent. It's why it is so disturbed by the darkness of the world. So here, this sextile that's going on between Pluto and Neptune is about understanding and transforming the rising of the phoenix, Aquarius, the moving into the future, the understanding the darkness serves the light. That's part of this conversation. Now, while Neptune is having a conversation with Pluto, it is also having a conversation with Uranus. And Uranus is having a conversation with Neptune. So they're talking together, but it's almost like it's soap opera where they're not talking over one another. The sextiles by nature need to be activated. So what I think is happening is that during this retrograde, we're going to revisit the idea of what the self means. That's the Aries energy. How do I identify myself? How do I take action? How do I process the emotions that are evoked through the human experience to their highest vibration? I think that the sextile between Neptune and Pluto is about understanding on a compassionate and empathetic level that we are co-creators. And if there is a dark experience that we're walking through, the soul has meaning and purpose behind it, and that it somehow serves the expansion of the soul that takes it into the future, which is the Uranus energy. Uranus is also not emotional. Uranus by nature to me is very, intellectual. And Pluto is not very emotional by nature, except when Pluto, yes, intense, brooding, powerful. We can even kind of attach some of the lower energies to Pluto's scorpionic dynamic, but Pluto uses those dynamics as a tool. Pluto is a strategic player. Remember, Scorpio is co-ruled by Mars. So here is Neptune in the mix of this conversation, having to revisit some of the harsher dynamics that Uranus and Pluto can foster so that the deconstruction of the human that no longer serves the future, that no longer serves the human's power of co-creation, there's understanding and compassion for it from Neptune. It's very interesting to me because Neptune very much feels like a stormy sea. I live in Southern California. There have been very high surf, and the way that the shoreline was before these big waves came, it doesn't look the same. And the pounding of the ocean on the shoreline is what's happening to us as humans. And this conversations that Neptune and Uranus are having with Pluto, sorry, the three of them together, it's about pushing the future forward, having compassion for the challenging process that is, and being determined to get the job done. When we look at Neptune, we're blurring boundaries, but if we think about what those boundaries are, they're human constructs. Pardon me. When we think about the fog and the confusion sometimes and the invisibility factor of Neptune, it's because it's compelling us in many ways to go down into our intuitive energies. When I think about the idea that this retrograde starts with Uranus will have just moved into 4 degrees, Pluto's retrograde at 4 degrees, and Neptune will go retrograde at 4 degrees. There is a revisiting of the 4th degree energy, which is layered, okay? First, we have the Cancerian dynamic. How did home, hearth, nurturing affect you, your belief systems? Each person, depending upon the environment they were raised, has a certain default belief. In the United States, for years, waking up and having, eggs and bacon for breakfast was considered a healthy breakfast. And that was the belief we grew up on. So, and that's not the same for other countries, but that's my point is that each dynamic around the earth has its own belief. Now we're revisiting those beliefs. Are they truly aligned to the version of ourselves we want to move forward in the future? Being in these revisiting the fourth, the third, the second, and the first degree Neptune is visiting, is revisiting the birth of the new self. It brings a bit of crisis and pressure. Imagine going through the birth canal. That's what 0 degrees of Aries is. And those first few degrees are akin to a baby coming out of the womb and, finding its voice. Back in the day, they used to slap the baby on the back and the baby would cry. That was considered a good sign. God bless how we bring babies into the world. I just thought about how bizarre that is. But this is what we're revisiting as we are rebirthing each one of ourselves from a new but yet familiar voice, because the soul is the true essence of who you are, not this physical apparatus. And the soul chooses the physical apparatus to acknowledge that it exists. That's the first degree. To act upon that I exist, the second degree. To become something, which is the third degree. And the fourth degree is like moving into the future. In Christopher Witecki's step system, the first degree is the sun, which is the I am. The second degree is the moon, which is I emote. The third degree is Jupiter, I expand. And the fourth degree is Uranus, I move into the future using my genius. I'm just recapping that. This is what I believe is going on. And I believe that the conversations with Pluto and with Uranus are fostering this. On a mundane level, okay, just like an everyday life level, you may find yourself revisiting things, like how your relationship with your body, the self, Aries, and what you put in the body. How do you always take aspirin or Advil when you have a headache? Do how the certain things that you have grown up on that are habitual will come up for review, and they'll come up in a Neptunian way. Neptune rules pharmaceuticals. It rules rest and sleep. It rules creativity. It rules musical expression. It rules dance. It rules physical dreams. It also rules the ability to dream into new realms, to experience through the physical out of body type experiences. We see, we talk a lot about compassion and transcendence in the Pisces Neptune energy, but it's really a difficult energy of traversing two worlds. There is we term the 12th house as a house of self-undoing, a house of sacrifice, because we're looking at it from the human perspective. From a soul's perspective, there is no sacrifice to give up that which holds us back, whether it be the physical body is now worn out its use and we cross over, or whatever. Well, I in my head I started to go somewhere, because in each rising sign, the Pisces energy, the Neptune ruled house will be in a different place, so there'll be another layer of what you're looking at. But just in general, the 12th house is a very karmic house of kind of remembering who you are on a soul level and why suffering serves the expansion of the soul. It's not easy at all. So as Neptune moves back, we're going to see Neptune sit at 4 degrees for quite some time. I'm going to pull up the chart and we're going to go over a few dates. Right now, this is the 7th, is the day that Neptune goes retrograde. And when we click on it, we can see that Uranus is at 4 degrees direct in Gemini, conjunct Mars. This is rather significant, to be frank. This is a very edgy energy, Mars being involved here. And then we have Pluto at 4 degrees retrograde. Again, sextiles need an awareness, an activation, a participation. When we're talking about Neptune, we're talking about activating through our spiritual body. Thank you, source energy. Thank you, God. However you want to term it. Thank you, love, the love energy for, and then whatever it is you want to create and how you want to live your future. Much of what I think the Gemini energy is a revolution of the mind. And I don't mean that's a discarding of old things that we've learned as much as it's a recognition that, learning certain things at certain times was useful, but then we can't always take those things into the future. I also think that there's more discernment. I think that Uranus here is awakening us to where we have been blurred, where we have been, got information that is not necessarily 100% clear or gives us clear direction, because the retrograde of Neptune is not about direction, it's about creation. And direction is something we follow because we are compelled somehow to do it, whether we are told to do it through our family dynamic and how we're raised or what society tells us. So I think this is really important because this is where Pluto comes in and starts to look at the group and how is the group really working to align with my future. Now we see Jupiter on the 7th has moved into Leo, and Jupiter will have a conversation, but that's the only other real planet that I'm going to talk about because I think that the outer planets are really setting up our perception for how we will interface with the personal planets moving forward. Again, there will be a feeling of a new birthing, but there's stress attached to it. There's pressure. There's a feeling of almost like as if things feel more compressed before they actually open up and expand. There is a gasping on some level for air, for that breath that feels most authentic to our truth. And then I think that as we get into that, into that kind of energy of recognition that we inherently have a right to exist, but not to exist for the validation of others, but for the story that we tell about ourselves, to write the music of our lives. I think that's what's so important. Let's look. So we have, I think this is rather significant. We have Uranus and Pluto and Neptune at 4 degrees all the way until the 30th of July. So all through July, we are going to feel this strong energy of, when I think of the 4th degree, my mind goes in layers. I think of, a foundation. I think of how I'm building on and not necessarily discarding or releasing my past, my childhood, no matter how toxic it might have been. It has the recipe to help my garden grow, to help me nurture my own intuitive knowing. I think that as the month goes on and we see Jupiter's, already moved to 6 degrees of Leo, the beliefs about having the right to have fun, to risk betting on myself, to ask myself, whose stage am I standing on and whose approval am I seeking? I think that's going to be a real big theme during this retrograde. And I think we're going to have waves of revelation where we recognize that we were playing to audiences that we didn't even recognize we were playing to, and they aren't necessarily an audience we want to play to. During this period of time when the outer planets are at 4 degrees, let me back up a little bit because Jupiter has some interesting dynamics going on. So around the 18th, Jupiter makes a direct opposition to Pluto. Okay. And while I'm not clicked on Pluto, so you're not seeing that line for the opposition, I think it's super important to note that all the planets are at 4 degrees. This to me is really a revisiting of what my beliefs are, my connection to spirit, because Jupiter co-rules Pisces and is a partner of Neptune when it comes to the ability to connect to that which cannot be seen, to the eternalness of our consciousness and the intention of what that consciousness wants to create and how that consciousness uses the physical apparatus to execute. So the Pluto's opposition to Jupiter here is really like digging deep into our beliefs about ourselves, about, there's often times where there's a subtle energy underneath the home experience of really the feasibility of your dreams. And it takes an eruption, an uncomfortable moment to push past that limitation. And I think that's the psychological dynamic that Pluto is representing right now. Very much pushing on what is your deeper truth and will you risk and bet on yourself? And when you do this, the most important thing about it is being able to connect to your soul's voice within, to practice your spiritual rituals, your creativity, listening to music, repeatedly asking yourself what your motives are for your actions. We also see that while there is an opposition to Pluto, there is a natural sextile here to Uranus. So in order for me to really connect this, I have to activate not just a version of myself, but the way that I think that's different than what I've been trained or how I've processed that it's okay for me to think outside the box. Some people live in families that allow them to express themselves in such colorful ways that it's like, wow, that's so cool. And there are other families that can give you one look and shut you down. So I think that this is a lot about, because the Gemini energy rules our childhood. It rules how we were taught when we were in grade school and in junior high. It rules how we felt accepted within our communities. So here, I think there's a real activation being opened up to look to the future and to think in broader ways. Now, I know that Jupiter is not necessarily in favor. It's considered a detriment in Gemini, but Jupiter is not. It's in its fire sign of Leo, activating Uranus's genius and asking on some level to, because this is both very expansive. Uranus and Jupiter in a conversation is not about the details of today. It's all about the expansion of tomorrow. And that can be a little bit of a challenge, but I think because they can hop, skip, and jump over things that actually, you can't plant the seed and then, pluck the fruit. The fruit has to go through a process before it's ready. And that process to me is Jupiter's opposition to Pluto. Okay, now where am I going? This is going on until Jupiter will be, for this, from the 18th to the 22nd of July, it will be within orb. We see it 4 degrees. So I think that this period of time is going to be exceptionally favorable and stressful at the same time. And that's where I also think that the Neptune's surrendering. When I say surrender, I don't mean to give up. I mean a surrender to the bigger picture of what you can't see about yourself. Many of you who watch my channel know that my beloved dog Lucky passed away in October, and at the time I could not see a future without him. I was devastated. And then weeks later, by the grace of God, Lulu showed up in my life because I really was on the edge, and it completely changed my viewpoint. And it brought something that Lucky had not brought into my life that I didn't know that I was missing. This is kind of a metaphor for what this transit has to offer you. All right, let's go to August 10th. I thought this was an interesting day because we see that Venus is in the mix here. Venus is coming into an exact opposition with Neptune. And Venus is also conjunct the supergalactic center, which is a point in the, the supergalactic center. There is a point in the supergalactic center. I'm sorry, my mind started thinking about, I confused myself for a second, is a point where you recognize yourself as source energy. And I think it's so interesting because in the Libra dynamic, we just think partnership. This is where my husband is. This is where I'm going to get married. This is where balance lives. And this is where Neptune's opposition to Venus, and this during this period of time, while Neptune is still being activated by Uranus and by Pluto, gets to recognize that a healthy partnership and to feel a sense of true flow and cooperation is a strong sense of self that we bring into the partnership. So I think this is a pretty important period of time. We also see that at this time, Mars is at 29 degrees of Gemini. Mars has not been in Gemini for 2 years. And when it was last in Gemini, it retrograded and spent like 7 months revisiting how I think. And here I really do think as Mars is about to go into its fall in Cancer, it's anxious to integrate what it has cerebrally processed into its intuitive body that will then demonstrate through its emotional body. And I want to offer this because the greatest warriors are not strategists. Yes, they can be, but they're mostly intuitive. They know how to pivot when things shift in the midst of chaos. And I think that's what Mars has to offer as it moves into Cancer, this particular trip, this particular jaunt around the zodiac. I think a lot of what Neptune's energy is during this retrograde is to dissolve the idea of separateness between individuals, and yet to allow for the individual to express itself as part of the collective. I think this is really an important dynamic, and something that when we connect to it, it's like looking at a tree and being able to see the individual beauty of each leaf on the tree, but knowing that that tree, it would not be beautiful without its leaves, and the leaf cannot live without the tree. I think that's is a lot of what's going on here. I'm gonna stop my share now because I don't think that I'm not really going to go through all the month's aspects. Again, I think we can take that in the weeklies. I think what we want to look at is the period of time that Neptune's at certain degrees and how that will be a subtle nuance in the review and the reinvention. So at the 4th degree, we're very much looking at, I think, a Uranian energy, moving into the future, awakening about how I was raised, the Cancerian energy, that 4th degree. When Neptune moves to 3 degrees, this will be August 17th through September 25th. I really think that we're revisiting the moon energy. I like Christopher Witecki's step system. I like the idea of that my emotional body, my feelings are the indication of my manifestation. So we're going to be revisiting that and how those emotional messages are truly messages from your soul. When we get Neptune down to the 2nd degree, this will be from September 26th through November 4th. We're looking at the Sun degree here. We're looking at, I'm sorry, I completely messed that up. The 3rd degree is the Jupiter degree. The 2nd degree is the Moon degree. And the 1st degree is the Sun degree. Let me back the bus up. From August 17th until September 25th, and please forgive me for my mistake, I'm not going to re-record this video. You're going to be revisiting your beliefs. You're going to be revisiting how you've allowed yourself to expand, how you've allowed yourself to move into your own sense of entrepreneurship, expressing your diversity, your new ideologies, your willingness to take the threads of that which is foreign to you and bringing it home to create your own sense of comfort. We also see that Jupiter is the co-ruler of Neptune. So I do think that this period of time when co-ruler of Pisces with Neptune, my goodness, my brain is all over the place. This period of time gives us sort of a double whammy, Neptune with a Jupiter flare to truly dig into spiritual practices, your meditations, daily walks, and acknowledging nature, or daily creativity, listening to music, allowing your body to dance and move. Again, we're talking about the Aries energy. So a lot of this is going to be not necessarily meditation in an Om position, but meditation through the awareness of how the body is moving and in flow with the soul. When we get to that second degree, we're talking about the moon energy. We're talking, this is September 26th through November 4th. And I think this is about combining the Aries spiritual warrior energy with the willingness to acknowledge how my emotions are rolling. Meaning this, a warrior who is angry is blocked. It's blocked from behaving in instinctual ways that will actually protect it and keep it surviving. There are millions of ambulances going on in the background right now. Sorry about that. I know you can't hear it, but I can. I think that's part. Now, again, we're looking at Pluto's going to be in a conversation. Uranus is going to be in a conversation. So whatever Neptune's trying to avoid or pretend doesn't exist, these other two planets are going to stoke up so that we can come to understanding and extract the wisdom from it versus being constantly pulled underneath the ocean of our emotions. Now we get to the first degree. This is so close to the world axis that there's almost a feeling of not being able to feel the difference of it. And Neptune on the world axis is a womb. It's a birthing point. It is the point of when you're taking that first breath of life and you're bursting out onto the human plane, and the ego is you identify yourself as separate. You have left the mother and now you're exposed. The dates of this will be from November 5th through December 12th, retrograde, but then we will have Neptune moving direct on December 13th, and this will take us all the way till January 17th, 2027. So I think that this period of time when Neptune is at 1 degree during the holidays, which are usually very heightened, there, lots of family time. If you're not physically spending it with family, the memories of family and what that means for you will come up. So I think that what Neptune is doing during this retrograde is dissolving the human viewpoint of where you might have felt invisible, you might have felt not fully connected, or that you can't grasp on to something or someone or something tangible. And it's revisiting how that experience is actually leading you to something more tangible. We're moving literally from I'll believe it when I see it to I'll see it when I believe it. Okay, one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go quickly through the zodiac by rising sign and tell you approximately, if you go in whole sign, I'm really more of a Placidus girl, but there are subtle layers to this retrograde depending upon your rising sign and where the Aries, where the Aquarius, and where the Gemini energy is in your chart. So let's start with Aries. Aries is obviously the first house. Gemini is going to be your third house, and Aquarius is your 11th house. So these dynamics will have a lot to do with how you process yourself in relation to others socially. Gemini is very social. Aquarius is very social. That's very true for the other signs as well. For my Tauruses, Aries is your 12th house. So Neptune is dissolving something where you have been inadvertently repeating a karmic pattern of invisibility or blurred lines or of not feeling strong. We see Aquarius is your 9th house of beliefs. Oh, I'm sorry. Aquarius is your 10th house of visibility and career. And then we see Gemini is your 2nd house of self-worth. So look for, those kind of themes for you, Taurus. For my Geminis, we see that Uranus will be in your 1st house for the next 8 years. This is going to be a fun rewrite and reinvention for you. We see Aquarius is your 9th house of beliefs and of foreign travel and of higher education. And then Aries is your 11th house of social networks, also moving forward, and your future. For my Cancers, your Aries energy is the 10th house of career and public reputation. Aquarius is your 8th house of transformation and of a new beginning, a revisit, a rebirth. And then we see that Gemini is your 12th house. Again, the 12th house is a very karmic house. It is a house that's so deeply unconscious that here's where you don't even recognize what you're thinking, because it's so deeply ingrained. So there will be awakenings that take place as a result of Uranus's transit there. For my Leos, we are looking at Aries is your 9th house, Aquarius is your 7th house, and Gemini is your 11th house. Aries' 9th house, again, is a house of expansion, a house of travel, a house of beliefs and ideologies. The 11th house of Gemini is a social house, a house of hopes and dreams and wishes. It's also a house of the future. And the Aquarius energy is the house of partnerships, where Pluto is going through and bringing in more energies and awarenesses of power and control, and how sex plays part of that in your relationships. For my Virgos, we see Aquarius is your 6th house of service. This is another karmic house, a house potentially of suffering when there is a lack of awareness. So Pluto is coming in and bringing in an awareness of where you have enslaved yourself that's preventing you from moving forward into your future. Gemini is your 10th house of public reputation and leadership. And Aries is your 8th house of transformation and rebirth. For my Libras, Aries is your 7th house of partnerships, balance, harmony, and cooperation. Now, cooperation is a two-way street, and oftentimes Libra acquiesces their opinion in order to keep the peace. You'll be revisiting if that's really peace or if that's just stuffing something down. We see that the Aquarius energy is your 5th house of self-expression and fun and romance. And then Gemini is your 9th house of beliefs and expansion. Scorpio, Aries is your 6th house of service and of slavery. And when I say that, that's the slavery of the mind in many ways, where I just don't seem to move forward. I just stay somewhere potentially in resentment, or I feel alone a lot. We see that the Aquarius energy is your 4th house of home, and the Gemini energy is your 8th house of transformation. So I think what you're going to be looking at is a lot of how you were raised in your childhood, and what expectations there were of you, and how you would serve those around you, your family, your cousins, your siblings, your neighborhood, your teams. Sagittarius, we're looking at Aquarius as your 3rd house of revolution and how you're thinking. Aries is your 5th house of romance, fun, and self-expression. So there's a whole opportunity here to stoke and fuel the fires of your own creativity. And then we see the Gemini as the 7th house of partnership. I think when we look at the Gemini being the 7th house of partnership here, we're looking at entering into potential collaborations, especially with the 5th house of Aries, Neptune there, that are future forward thinking or potentially involve technology. For my Capricorns, Aquarius is your 2nd house of self-worth, of your skills, and of your personal resources, mean how you make money, and your personal values and beliefs. So there'll be a rewrite there. Aries is your 4th house of home. There could be a dissolution in some respects of what's happening within the home. And at the same time, There could be a revisit of what you want to do and how you want to live in your home, the spiritual practices. And it could even be something as mundane as deciding to get a water element in your home so that you feel a sense of calm and peace. Not everything has to be huge. And then finally, we have for my Capricorns, we have the Aries is the fourth house, Gemini is the sixth house, and Aquarius is the second house. The Gemini is sixth house, so there could be a whole new idea of what you're doing with work, and of course, how you approach that work and processes in general. Aquarius, your first house, Pluto is going through your first house. That's no surprise to you. We have the Aries is your third house, and Gemini is your fifth house. This is really powerful because this is all about you, all about rewriting you, all about your creativity, all about your bravery to use your voice in ways that moves your story forward, first internally, then mentally, I should say emotionally, internally, then mentally, and then through action. And then finally, Pisces, Aries is your second house, Gemini is your fourth house, and Aquarius is your 12th house. You'll be working through some things that have a lot to do with your self-worth and how you have allowed yourself to stand up for your own individuality in face of family beliefs or family dynamics, even in potential relation to a sibling of some kind. And you may be working through some feelings of being alienated or feeling 12th house Aquarius is kind of difficult because it really kind of takes all the individuality that who and what you are and what you love about yourself, and it asks it to sort of mute it down and think about other people as you come into that Pisces first house. So it could be a little bit tough. You just naturally feel a little bit alone there. So this is what's going to go on with Neptune's retrograde over the next 6 months, really 5 months. And I think that this is an opportunity for all of us. And I think the best way to go about it is to allow yourself to be creative, to look at time spent maybe alone, drawing, again, listening to music, doing needlepoint crochet, diamond art. I don't really care what it is, but allowing yourself that privilege, thinking of it as a meditation, and then really asking yourself, what does my soul want to experience during this earthly time? Or am I running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to be productive so that if somebody asks me, what'd you do today? I sound like a valuable human. That's it for me, everybody. Feel the love. Peace out. And be sure to hit that like button. There you go. Hit that like button. See you soon.